How do we tell if our child is ready for daycare? So, there's actually something in my studies that it's called school readiness, and it's about helping parents to know if their child's ready to move from early childhood education to primary school. And I haven't been able to get past this part of my studies because it's quite bizarre to me, seeing as my children have been homeschooled for the past 11 and a half years, and they didn't like school. They were never truly ready for school. But I was living with this belief as a mother that school just is. There's no choice, there's no option. School just is. Now, I didn't have my kids in daycare, but I did still believe that they had to go to school, and that I thought that they were ready according to their age, and because they were very excited at the idea of going to school. They loved coming shopping and buying all of their supplies and their backpack and their shoes, and they were so excited to go to this new place, this big school where they could make friends and play on the play equipment and do arts and crafts and all sorts of things. And in the first few weeks, it really was enjoyable for my children because it was something to do, but it soon wore off. And I did keep my eldest in school for 6 years, but every year I noticed, especially after that initial preschool or prep, after the first few weeks, they started to realize reality, which for them was they didn't like being away from home and they didn't like being away from me. And luckily, after some time, it did take quite a few years because I was too scared to even become aware of this possibility that they weren't they weren't right for school and school wasn't right for them. And I kept sending them because I thought that was just what you do. So today I want to go back a bit to daycare, and how can we tell if little children, babies and toddlers and preschool age children are ready for daycare. So I have had experiences with children in my care, both in a public childcare centre and my own family daycare. And I have been able to tell that some children, while possibly all children will experience at some time not wanting to be at daycare and separation anxiety and not wanting to be away from home and their mum or dad, I have noticed that it's more about whether or not these children can cope being in daycare. So, as an early childhood educator who operates my own family daycare and who accepts children in my care, I must align with childcare on some level, right? So while at some point in my life, particularly when I began homeschooling, I did have this strong rebellion against the system where I thought that all children should be at home with their families and no child should be in school or daycare. But I have come to realize over the years that some children do enjoy this environment and some parents really need to rely on others for care. Rather than being judgmental like I once was, I am a little bit more understanding now that it's okay that I'm somebody that provides a service for parents who either don't want to or cannot be with their children 5 days a week, 24 hours a day, or 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And so I've found value and meaning in being somebody that provides that type of service, because I can be there for these children a lot of the time when their parents can't. So I want to focus more on sharing for those parents who do feel that their child needs to be in care. How can you tell if they're ready? If you feel like you have some kind of control over when they start care, I can share some signs and on my own experiences on how to maybe tell if your child is ready. So as children, even speaking of ourselves when we were young, all children experience trauma. A child who sleeps in a cot and wakes up crying, and a parent who needs a moment to get up and get to that room. It could take 3 minutes. It could take 5 minutes. A parent could be in the toilet and a child awakes from a nap in a cot. That's a trauma. And some of these traumas are unavoidable and some are avoidable. So you could be a parent who has never put your child in a cot and that child sleeps next to you in bed. Yes, that can reduce that trauma of waking up and being alone in a room, but there are always going to be things that are unavoidable for children that have the capacity to cause a traumatic experience. So from my own experiences, I do believe that childcare can be traumatic for some children. The act of being separated from a parent, especially at particular ages in development, can be very traumatic for children. And this can be a trauma that occurs that isn't healed or processed in a natural way and stays with that child throughout childhood and adulthood, and possibly can be recognized through awareness later in life. What I mean by this is, through my own experiences with trauma healing and therapy, I have come to see that certain childhood experiences of my own, like being left somewhere without a parent, did cause significant changes in my behavior, and it was traumatic, and it was something that I suppressed and stored away that I wasn't aware of, and it was playing out like in things like my relationships. So children who are particularly separated a lot from their parents when they're young can develop issues later in life, and it can affect their relationships. They could have abandonment issues and all sorts of things that can be seen in many different ways. So yes, children being left at daycare when they don't want to be away from their parents, that is a trauma. Now, the older children get, the better they become at coping. So it's not, as I said before, if children need to be in care, if parents have to work and there's no way around it, or they truly do believe that daycare is the right place for their child, we can't avoid that that's going to cause some kind of trauma for that child. And what we're looking at for readiness then in those circumstances is, can that child cope with that trauma? So what children do, and what we did ourselves, is when something's very traumatic to a young child, that can feel like a matter of life or death. So we go into survival mode and we create coping mechanisms that shut off or shut away that pain and help us to deal with that pain in a way that is not threatening and safe. So this is actually not a bad thing that we are set up to do as human beings, because if we were children who didn't have a coping mechanism, babies could very well not survive certain traumas. So we do have this amazing ability as human beings to learn coping skills to cope with very traumatic experiences. And it is our responsibility later in life as adults to go back and properly process those traumas so that they are healed and we no longer carry them with us. Because as children, we can't do this. We need help by the adults around us to process traumas. So if you are not sure if your child is ready for daycare, here are some signs. So age is a factor. Obviously, the younger a child is, the harder it's going to be, especially if they are breastfed. Now, I don't mean harder necessarily in emotionally coping, because actually the separation anxiety cannot be seen sometimes in children until approaching 12 months old, and it can actually increase over the years till age 4 or 5. I've seen children who are approaching 4 years old in kindy, and they have extreme separation anxiety. So I feel like it's more seen in children as they get older, that separation anxiety. However, there's things to consider like feeding, and if babies are still taking milk. Babies that are bottle fed and taking formula are more likely to cope in a daycare and receiving the bottle, because they've had some experience with taking that bottle. And whereas I've noticed that breastfed babies, for example, they find it difficult. And I know, because I'm a breastfeeding mum, I breastfed all my children and they refused to take a bottle, and they especially wouldn't take the bottle for people they weren't used to. So breastfed babies tend to be extra clingy with their mothers, so for obvious reasons. So I feel that waiting until sort of at least around 12 months for breastfed babies they're going to cope a lot better, because at around that age, they can go longer periods without that breast milk. And other children who are quite happy taking the bottle, I do feel that we can look for signs of coping in when they're being left. If after a certain period of time there's no improvement, like if a child is crying and screaming for a long period of time after the first 1 or 2 drop-offs, that's quite normal. But if that child continues to cry over long periods of time, that's not actually good for their little nervous system. So what I will often do is, when children are first starting at my service and they're very young and they experience that extreme separation anxiety, is I will have mum come and pick them up after a certain amount of time if they're not settling. And this can be stretched out longer and longer over a period of time. And we're not looking to abolish that separation anxiety or completely get rid of it. We're looking to reduce it. So after some time, children in my care they will cry. They will initially cry when mum leaves, but they will calm down immediately and be able to find comfort and safety and happiness. That's what we're looking for at daycare. If that's happening, then we know that that child, whether they want to be there or not, because if we give all children a choice and they could speak and be conscious of their thoughts and feelings at that age, they would most certainly say, I don't want to be here, or I only want to be here if you stay with me. Now, this isn't always the case, because children enjoy coming to my service because they have a lot of fun. They actually feel safe there. And so some children in certain environments of daycare can be fine to be there and actually desire to be there without mum. So the environment plays a big role in the readiness of children in daycare. If you're dropping them off at a large daycare centre and they're constantly competing for attention, or educators are constantly cranky with them, then of course they're not going to feel ready to be left there. So the main thing is we're looking for, now if a child is not coping, we can also tell by if they are upset all day long at daycare, if they are not happy and they're not able to find enjoyment. I did have a pre-kindy age child once in one of the rooms I worked in, and he would come probably once or twice a week, and he would not participate in any activities. He would be kind of frozen, and his body was so tense and stiff throughout the day, and I felt like this was not good for the whole day, because his body was in a constant state of resistance, and that's just not a nice feeling for any child to be in that state of anxiety all day. So I would phone the parents and inform them and give my honest opinion that I think that he should have shorter days and go home earlier. So this is an option too. If you feel like your children isn't coping or ready, only have them in care for short periods of time rather than whole days. So that's another sign if your child is ready or not. If they can find some enjoyment in the day and they can relax and they can let go, that's a good sign. But if you're finding or you're hearing from educators that they are just not able to be happy or find enjoyment or safety or comfort, then that's worth questioning. Is my child ready to be here? And as I said, this doesn't mean that all parents need to say, well, I just won't go to daycare, because a lot of parents don't really think that way, because as I said, we're all raised to believe that children belong in these places. But if it is an option for you to homeschool or not go down that road, it is worth questioning that. However, if you feel that that's not an option, all we can really do is be there for these children and let them know that we can see that they aren't ready. Even though we feel like we may not be in a place to do something about that, there are ways to help them. As I said, making sure that the childcare environment is supportive of this child not being ready or coping, making sure there's not too much noise or sensory overload, like a smaller centre or a family daycare for these types of children, acknowledging their feelings and letting them know that I see and feel and hear and understand that you don't want to be here, and it's okay to feel that way. So I hope you've liked this video, and if you have anything you'd like to add, please leave a comment. And I'll see you next time. Bye.